She moves like a storm contained in silk. Every glance, every tremor of her lips, a hidden calculation I am only beginning to decipher. Desire is not granted. It is extracted, quietly, patiently, from the cracks in her carefully constructed walls. I have learned to watch, to measure, to feel her absence before her presence even touches me. There is a rhythm to her contradictions, a pattern beneath the chaos of charm and laughter, and those who rush in are crushed beneath it, blind to the traps of intimacy. But I do not rush. I do not yield. I listen. I wait. And in the silence, between her words, I find the rules that bend her without breaking her. The quiet laws of control that Machiavelli whispered through centuries, waiting for a mind patient enough to understand. Observation is the first weapon, and it is silent. I learned this the hard way, fumbling through warmth that seemed genuine, only to find it was a test, a mirror held to my weaknesses. Every gesture, every laugh that lingers too long, every hesitation in her voice, tells a story she will never admit aloud. The law of observation states, observe before you touch, measure before you move. It is simple in phrasing, but brutal in execution. I watched her, not with longing, not with expectation, but with the patience of a sculptor, studying marble. She revealed herself in small betrayals. Slight glances when she thought no one noticed, the way her fingers lingered on another's arm as if seeking confirmation of her own effect. Internal conflict sharpened my senses. I wanted to react, to claim her warmth as my own, but the law demands restraint. I began cataloging patterns, the moments she sought approval, the ways she tested boundaries without knowing it. The subtle power plays hidden in casual conversation. Each detail was a piece of a larger map, a blueprint of desires and vulnerabilities she thought she hid beneath charm. Emotional reasoning became a weapon. To misread a sign would cost more than pride, it would cost leverage. There were nights I lay awake replaying interactions, tracing her steps in my mind like footprints in sand, noting where her attention lingered and where it faltered. Patterns emerged. The predictable way she reacted to scarcity, how she sought validation from certain types of men, how loyalty could be teased, stretched, and measured. I learned to separate my emotional response from the observation itself, to see her not as a woman to be won, but as a puzzle to be solved, a force to be understood. The climax of this law comes not in confrontation, but in quiet recognition, when betrayal peeks through a smile. When subtle manipulation drifts in her laughter, I no longer flinch. I have seen the veil lift, and I remain untouched. Knowledge becomes a form of power, silent but absolute. By the time I chose to act, I had already won the war of understanding. The reflection of this mastery in my own eyes is unmistakable. I am not her captive nor her victim. I am the observer. And in observation I discover the first law of silent dominion. Presence is more than arrival. It is a force that bends attention without asking permission. The law of presence teaches, your absence is a weapon, your presence a command. I learned that desire, when left unhurried, grows in strength. To move too quickly, to offer warmth too soon, is to hand away leverage. I became deliberate, a shadow that lingers in her perception, a quiet gravity she cannot ignore. Even without speech, even without touch, my mere existence shaped the way she thought, the way she lingered on what I withheld. Emotional energy is contagious. I discovered that the intensity of my calm, the steadiness of my gaze, created a ripple she could not resist. Her reactions betrayed dependency, a fleeting anxiety when I delayed my response, a subtle shift in posture when I remained aloof. These were not moments of control, but signs, patterns, indicators of a growing gravitational pull. I did not manipulate with aggression. I guided with presence. The conflict within me was brutal, the temptation to act, to close the distance, to dissolve the tension. Yet restraint proved intoxicating, both for her and for me. I watched her test boundaries, probing the edges of attention and affection, measuring the space I allowed. I held my center. She leaned into absence like a moth drawn to light, unaware that the light was carefully positioned, measured to her rhythm. In these moments, emotional gravity became my silent ally. Desire was no longer something to earn through chaos. It was a force cultivated, like a garden tended in shadow. Each glance, each unspoken question, each lingering hesitation became evidence of the law's effectiveness. The climax of presence manifests quietly. She begins to seek the moments I withhold, to crave the warmth I grant selectively, to bend. Her routines around a rhythm she does not fully understand. I feel power not as dominance, but as inevitability, an almost invisible shaping of her world. The reflection in myself is stark. Control need not scream, it need only exist, constant and deliberate. And in presence, I discover the second law of silent dominion, where emotional gravity becomes an unspoken command, bending hearts without breaking them. Desire is not a gift, it is a tool. It is not surrendered, it is extracted with patience and precision. I learned early that to satisfy immediately is to relinquish power. To withhold strategically is to cultivate obsession. The law of desire proclaims, make her want what you withhold, control by measured absence. It is not cruelty, it is mastery. Desire thrives in scarcity, in the quiet tension of anticipation, in the silent promise of what remains just out of reach. I began to measure reactions meticulously. Her eyes when I paused a conversation, the subtle tremor when attention shifted elsewhere, the tiny flinches in her tone when she suspected absence. These were not weaknesses. They were the signs of attachment forming, the signals of influence taking root. Each interaction became a calculated act of restraint, a withheld compliment, a delayed message, a glance that lingered just long enough to ignite curiosity. I resisted immediate satisfaction, knowing that desire, when nurtured correctly, bends behavior with more force than any command. Internal conflict is unavoidable. I longed at times to collapse the space, to reward the devotion that brewed in silence. But restraint sharpens the mind, strengthens perception, and deepens influence. Emotional reasoning guides action. Her want is a reflection of my presence, my absence, and my deliberate inconsistency. Patterns emerge. She begins to structure her days around fleeting possibilities of connection, to test boundaries subtly, to reveal vulnerabilities without knowing she does. The climax arrives when desire becomes obedience without overt manipulation. She moves, acts, even thinks in ways subtly dictated by the tension I create. Her attachment is no longer casual. It is a rhythm intertwined with my restraint, a silent choreography in which I lead invisibly. I feel the intoxicating pull of control, not in dominance, but in orchestration. Every glance, every pause, every whispered expectation is mine to shape. By the time the reflection settles, I see the elegance of the law. Desire, when harnessed through scarcity and subtlety, transforms attachment into influence, longing into compliance, and fascination into quiet devotion. This is the third law, the slow, deliberate creation of want, the invisible shaping of a mind that believes she controls her desire yet moves exactly as I orchestrate. Manipulation does not shout, it whispers. It bends the heart without leaving scars, it guides without chains. The law of emotional manipulation declares, influence through reflection, never coercion. I discovered that she responds less to force than to resonance, less to commands than to the mirrored echo of her own emotions. My voice became a shadow of her own longing, my expressions a reflection of her unspoken fears, desires, and pride. I learned to mirror just enough, to empathize strategically, to show vulnerability like a key pressed lightly against a lock. The delicate balance is exquisite. Too much, and control collapses. Too little, and influence fades. I observed the subtle signs, when she sought approval for the smallest choices, when guilt nudged her decisions, when pride dictated hesitation. These cues were the terrain of silent power. I learned to navigate them without force, guiding her choices like a river shaped by invisible banks. Every reaction became data, every smile a test of my subtle orchestration. The emotional conflict inside me was constant, the pull of attachment, the temptation to become fully present, versus the necessity of detachment to maintain influence. Scenarios played themselves out like quiet experiments. I mirrored her laughter, allowed empathy to fill the spaces of tension, presented challenges she did not see coming. In these shadows, influence grew without overt awareness. She adjusted her behavior to align with the reflection I provided, believing it emerged from her own desires rather than my subtle nudges. Emotional manipulation, I realized, was not theft. It was partnership, guided by a silent hand that she could never trace. The climax comes quietly. A decision she makes, a favor she grants, a hesitation she discards, all influenced by patterns she could not name. I remain still, untouched, observing the fruits of subtle orchestration. It is the perfection of control, the kind that leaves no trace, only results. By the end of this law, I see the truth of silent mastery. Influence does not need to scream. It does not need to command attention. It exists in the spaces between actions, in the quiet shaping of choices, in the unspoken understanding that her behavior now dances to rhythms she does not fully recognize. Here lies the fourth law, the delicate, gentle shadows that bend hearts. Without breaking them, a mastery that is invisible, enduring, and profoundly intoxicating. Every interaction is a trial. Every smile hides a question, every touch, a measurement. The law of testing states, the wise test, the naive obey, only the perceptive command. I learned to construct invisible trials, subtle challenges that revealed truth without confrontation. She is unknowingly transparent in her reactions. The way she navigates scarcity, jealousy, or conflicting priorities exposes character she believes concealed. To test without exposing myself is both art and strategy. I created scenarios that measured loyalty, withholding attention, feigning disinterest, watching how she responded when expectations were delayed or denied. Each reaction was a key, each hesitation a revelation. Subtle patterns emerged, the flicker of anxiety when I withdrew, the recalibration of priorities when I held back, the small acts of defiance revealing both strength and desire. The emotional conflict inside me was deliberate. I weighed each response, detached from attachment, observing how power is negotiated silently. There were moments of betrayal that surfaced in the minutiae, a glance too long, a smile misplaced, a choice that contradicted loyalty. But testing is not about punishment, it is about understanding. I discovered that the more I withheld, the more transparent her intentions became. And in transparency lies mastery, for one cannot manipulate what is already known. These hidden trials sharpened my perception and solidified influence. The climax of testing is subtle, yet absolute. She reveals herself fully through response, unaware that each choice is a mirror reflecting her own inclinations and vulnerabilities. I see patterns crystallize, revealing not only desire but the depth of attachment, the limits of loyalty, the contours of power she unknowingly grants. The emotional satisfaction is quiet but profound. I am no longer a participant in her games. I am the silent architect of the field upon which they unfold. By the end of this law, I understand the strength in observation transformed into action. Testing is not cruelty, it is knowledge. It is the recognition that every interaction can be a revelation, and every revelation a step closer to invisible mastery. The fifth law is clear. Hidden trials reveal truth, and truth becomes leverage, shaping behavior before a word is spoken, guiding decisions before intentions are voiced. Detachment is the ultimate weapon. The law of detachment proclaims, the more you remain untouched, the more you become indispensable. I learned that power is amplified when I remain emotionally neutral, when warmth is measured and engagement carefully rationed. She flinches. In absence, she seeks attention I do not yield. She bends toward me without understanding why. Detachment transforms desire into dependency, longing into silent obedience. I practiced emotional neutrality like a discipline. Drama, flattery, and attention became irrelevant, tools to observe rather than provoke. Her responses betrayed fascination, the subtle anxiety when I delayed a message, the way she anticipated gestures, the tiny compromises she made without my prompting. Internal conflict surfaced, suppressing natural attachment, resisting the instinct to reward affection immediately, but each moment reinforced power. My presence became precious because it was limited, and my absence became influential because it was deliberate. I noticed signs that detachment worked. She revealed hidden priorities, adjusted behavior in my silence, tested my limits without knowing they were controlled. Emotional manipulation fused with restraint. Desire was concentrated in scarcity, attention became currency, and I was the unseen hand guiding outcomes. Conflict arose internally, balancing empathy with strategy, but detachment demanded rigor. To yield prematurely was to lose, to act impulsively was to betray the law. The climax of detachment is quiet, but undeniable. She acts, reacts, and submits to the rhythm I have set without overt force. The control I wield is invisible, profound, absolute. She believes she navigates freely, yet her choices align with patterns I have established in silence. The reflection, in myself, is unshakable. I am untouchable because I have mastered absence. I am indispensable because I have withheld fully. I am the quiet force shaping reality without a gesture. By the conclusion of this law, detachment has transformed power into inevitability. The sixth law is clear. Mastery is born from distance, influence thrives in measured absence, and desire crystallizes when one remains emotionally sovereign. This is the calm, deliberate engine of silent dominance, the invisible gravity that bends attention, attachment, and action toward me without a word. The ultimate mastery is silence. The law of silent empire teaches silence rules where noise fails, detachment reigns where desire bends. All the previous laws converge here: observation, presence, desire, manipulation, testing, detachment, and form an architecture of invisible control. True influence is not declared, it is sensed. She moves, speaks, and acts within boundaries she does not see, governed by patterns I have quietly established. I observed final signs of power, behavior aligned with my intentions, loyalty cemented without proclamation, influence embedded so subtly it felt natural to her. She believed she navigated freely, yet every choice bore the imprint of careful orchestration. Emotional conflict dissolved into clarity. I no longer reacted. I no longer guided consciously. I merely existed as the gravitational center around which her world pivoted. Silent Empire is not about spectacle. It is the quiet inevitability of influence that cannot be resisted. Moments of betrayal had come and gone, but now absence, consistency, and subtle orchestration forged unshakable obedience. Desire, carefully nurtured and measured, had matured into devotion. Attachment, previously fluid, was now tethered to my strategic presence and absence. The reflection in myself is chilling in its certainty. Power need not roar. It simply exists. Omnipresent, yet invisible, absolute in its quiet command. The climax is the apex of invisible mastery. She moves, seeks, anticipates, and obeys without awareness of the shaping hand. Her decisions, her loyalty, her desires, all flow through patterns she cannot name. Influence has become instinct, strategy is internalized, and I remain untouchable in my detachment. Every previous law manifests here, synergizing into an empire. No words could construct, no force could demand. By the end, I stand untouched, silent, yet omnipresent. The seventh law is complete. True mastery is invisible, eternal, and absolute. Silence has become kingdom, detachment has become reign, desire has become submission. And in that quiet empire, I am neither cruel nor boastful. I am inevitable. No one sees the architect behind the choices. No one questions the force guiding actions, and no one can reclaim what has been shaped so deliberately. Power, once gained silently, is never lost.